Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today's chapter it's a continuation of the previous chapter, chapter 13 from the book on the viruses, virions, and prions. And today's part it's on the viruses and the cancer. So the contribution of viruses in the learning outcome for today's chapter. It's on, you should be able to define the oncogenes and the transform cells. And we're going to discuss on the relationship between DNA and RNA containing viruses and their relationship with the cancer. We're going to provide some examples on the latent viral infections, as well as differentiate persistent viral infections from the latent viral infections. All right. There are several types of cancers which are known to be caused by viruses. Molecular biological research has shown that the mechanism of disease are similar, even when a virus doesn't cause the cancer. So the relationship between cancers and viruses was first demonstrated in early 1900s when one of the virologists at that time, Wilhelm Ellerman, together with another virologist called Olaf Bang, they were working in Denmark and were trying to isolate the causative agent for chicken leukemia. So what they found is that leukemia could be transferred to healthy chickens by cell-free filtrates that contain the viruses. So a few years later, another virologist was working at an institute, Rockefeller Institute in New York. He found that a chicken sarcoma, which is a cancer of connective tissues, can as well be similarly transmitted. So basically, he confirmed the narratives of the Danish scientists. So virus-induced adenocarcinoma, which is another type of cancer caused by the virus, it's a cancer of glandular epithelial tissue, in mice was discovered in 1936. So at that time, it was clearly shown that the mouse mammillary glands, the mammillary gland tumor, they are transmitted from the mother to the offspring through mother's milk. And the cancer causing another type of virus, which is called SE polyomavirus, was discovered also and isolated somewhere in mid-1900s by another American scientist. So the viral cause of cancer can often be unrecognized for many different reasons. First, most of these particles of some viruses infect cells but don't induce cancer. And second is that cancer might not develop until long after the viral infection. And the third reason is that the cancers, even those caused by viruses, they don't seem to be contagious as viral diseases usually are. Okay, almost anything that can alter the genetic material of a eukaryotic cell has the potential to make normal cells cancers. So these cancer-causing alterations to cellular DNA affect parts of the genome which are called oncogenes. So oncogenes were first identified in cancer-causing viruses and were thought to be part of a normal viral genome. However, American microbiologist, his name is Michael Bishop, and Harold Vermes, They received the Nobel Prize in 1989, Nobel Prize in Medicine, for proving that cancer-inducing genes carried by viruses are actually derived from animal cells. So Bishop and Varmus showed that the cancer-causing gene, which is known as an SRC gene in avian sarcoma viruses, is derived from normal part of the chicken genes. So oncogenes can be activated to abnormal functioning by a variety of agents, including mutagenic chemicals, high energy radiation, and including the viruses. So viruses capable of inducing tumor in animal cells are called oncogenic viruses, or in other words, also oncoviruses. Approximately around 10% of cancers are known to be virus induced. A defining feature of all oncogenic viruses is that their genetic material integrates in the host cell's DNA and replicates along with the host cell's chromosome. And this mechanism of replication is very similar to the lysogenic cycle of bacteriophage when it infects a bacteria, if you remember from the early chapter. And it can alter the host cell's characteristic in the same way as the bacteriophage does in the bacteria. So tumor cells undergo transformation. They acquire properties that are distinct from the properties of uninfected cells or from infected cells that don't form tumors. After being transformed by viruses, many tumor cells they contain a virus-specific antigen on their cell surface, and this specific antigen is called tumor-specific transplantation antigen (TSTA), or an antigen in their nucleus, which is known as T antigen. So the transformed cells they tend to be irregularly shaped compared to the normal cells, and they tend to exhibit a certain chromosomal abnormalities, such as unusual number of chromosomes and fragmented chromosomes. Okay, DNA oncogenic viruses, they are found with several families of DNA containing viruses. So these groups include the adenovirus, herpes viridia, proxoviridia, papavirida, and hepa-DNA viridia. So among the papavirida viruses, papilloma viruses, they cause uterine cancer, or in other words, it's called as cervical cancer. Virtually all cervical and anal cancers are caused by human papilloma virus, or HPV. So a vaccine against 4 HPV types is recommended for 11 to 12 years old girls and boys together. Another virus, which is called Epstein-Barr virus, or EB virus, was isolated from Burkitt's lymphoma, another type of cancer, in 1969 by a scientist which was called Michael Epstein, and that's where the name of the virus also comes from. And it was discovered by Michael Epstein and Yvonne Barr. So they took the last names of each scientist, Epstein-Barr virus. The proof that the Epstein-Barr virus, or EB virus, can cause cancer was accidentally demonstrated in somewhere in 1985 when a young boy, a 12-year-old boy, known only with the name of David, he received a bone marrow transplant. And several months after the transplantation, he died out of cancer. And the doctors they did an autopsy, and they revealed that the virus had been unwittingly introduced into the boy with the bone marrow transplant. So, Another DNA virus that causes cancer is also hepatitis B virus, or known as HBV. And many animal studies have been performed that have clearly indicated that the causal role of HBV in liver cancer. In one of the human study, virtually all people with liver cancer had previously had HBV infection. So as you can see, it's like most of the uh, virus-related infections in animals are as well related to human. All right. So RNA oncogenic viruses, in comparison with the DNA viruses, among RNA viruses, only the oncoviruses in the family of Retroviridia they cause cancer or are able to cause cancer. So the human T cell leukemia virus, HDLV1 and HDLV2, they are retroviruses that can cause adult T cell leukemia and lymphoma in humans. So the T cells are a type of white blood cells involved in immune response. So at the time of infection with the viruses, it's the T cells which actually are at the site of infection. So sarcoma viruses of cats, chicken, and other rodents, and the mammary tumor viruses of mice are also known as retroviruses. So another retrovirus known as feline leukemia virus, or FELV, causes leukemia in cats and is transmissible among cats. There is a test to detect the virus in cat serum. So the ability of retroviruses to induce tumors is related to their production of several transcriptase, production of reverse transcriptase by the mechanism described previously, if you remember from the reverse transcriptase viruses. So the virus itself it requires or it contains an RT enzyme, reverse transcriptase enzyme, which transcribes the RNA into a DNA. So the DNA can enter the nucleus and can replicate and can produce more types of the viruses. So the provirus, which is double-stranded DNA molecule, synthesized from the viral RNA and becomes integrated into the host cell's DNA. So the DNA of this virus enters the nucleus, attaches itself to the DNA of the host cell, and remains there. So there is a new genetic material. It's introduced into the host cell's genome, and is the key reason retroviruses can contribute to the cancer. Some retroviruses contain oncogenes, others contain promoters that turn on oncogenes or other cancers causing factors. Okay, oncolytic viruses. Um, Oncolytic viruses infect and lyse cancer cells. So, in other words, they are good kind of type of viruses. They were discovered in early 1900s when the physicians they observed that tumors regressed in patients with concurrent viral infections. In other words, uh, the tumor actually they were subsiding among the patients which were actually suffering from some type of viral infection. So oncolytic viruses they include adenovirus, vaccinia virus, as well as simplex virus. Clinical trials in humans and mice have been done, and they have suggested that oncolytic viral therapy may provide treatment for some type of cancer, not all of them. And several viruses are known to selectively infect cancer cells. And these are being genetically modified to remove virulence genes and add colony stimulating factor genes so they can promote white blood cells in order to destroy the cancer cells. Okay, latent infections and persistent viral infections. A virus can remain in the equilibrium with the host and not actually produce any disease for a long period. And often it can happen for many, many years. So it's like a dormant stage. So the oncogenic viruses just that we just discussed are examples of such latent infection. All of the human herpes viruses can remain in the host cells throughout the life of an individual. When the herpes viruses are reactivated by the immunosuppression, in the case of the AIDS infection, the resulting infection may be fatal. So the classic example of such a latent infection is the infection of the skin by simplex viruses, which produce cold sores. So this virus inhibits the host nerve cells, but causes no damage until it's activated by a stimulus such as fever or sunburn, and hence the term comes fever blisters. So in some individuals viruses are produced, but symptoms they never appear. Even though a large percentage of human population carries simplex virus, only 10 to 15% of people carrying the virus exhibit the disease. So a good example is the chicken pox virus. I'm sure a lot of you has heard of chicken pox or has had chicken pox when you were children, and the virus which causes chicken pox is called varicella. Varicellus varicella-virus. And the chicken pox virus can also exist in latent stage. So chicken pox is a skin disease that is usually acquired when you are a child, in childhood. So the virus gains access to the skin via the blood. So from the blood, some viruses may enter nerves where they remain for a long period of time. So that later in time, during the lifetime, it changes in the immune cells, such as T cells, may respond and can activate these latent viruses. So when the latent viruses are activated, which were present on the nerves that remained on the nerves, they will cause shingles. And the shingle rash appears on the skin along the nerve lines in which the virus was latent. So shingles usually occurs among 10 to 20% of people who previously had chicken pox. So a difference between latent viral infection and persistent viral infection is that a persistent viral infection occurs gradually over a long period. Another word is called as chronic viral infection. Typically, persistent viral infections are fatal. A number of persistent viral infections have in fact been shown to be caused by conventional viruses. For example, several years after causing measles, the measles virus can be responsible for a rare form of encephalitis, which we call it as subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, or SSPE. All right, in this figure, you have the comparison between a latent and persistent viral infection. A persistent viral infection is apparently, as you can see in the picture, different from the latent viral infection in that in most persistent viral infections, detectable infectious virus gradually builds up over a long period of time, rather than appearing suddenly, like in latent infection. Right in here we have several examples of latent and persistent viral infections which are listed on the table. You can see the disease which are under the latent uh, diseases. We have the cold sores, or leukemia, or shingles. However, the persistent ones, which mean the viruses are continuously being released, we have the cervical cancer, and that's why, if not treated, they are deadly infections. We have the cervical cancer, HIV/AIDS, liver cancer, persistent enterovirus infections, progressive encephalitis, and SSPE that we just mentioned, subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, which is a virus that it causes measles as well. So with this, I think we conclude the chapter on the viruses, virions and the prions, and I hope every one of you learned and something new today, and I wish you best of luck on your future studies. Thank you.